All right, hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. This time we're going to be looking at a case that really got a lot of twists and turns and conflicting narratives, and that's the story of Corey Richens. We've got a ton of source material to go through, court documents, interviews, even some family testimonies, and to be honest with you, this one's a real head scratcher. So our mission today is basically to help you guys try and understand this legal battle a little bit better and maybe figure out what we think happened.
You know what I think is so interesting about this case? It really makes you think about family and how things appear on the surface. We tend to think, oh, a family is successful, they seem happy, that must mean things are good. But this case really shows you that that's not always the whole picture.
Oh, absolutely. So, yeah, we're talking about Eric and Corey Richens, and at first
Yeah.
glance, they look like the perfect couple, living the dream in Utah. Eric was a really successful contractor. Corey was flipping houses. They had three young sons going on vacations. Businesses were doing well, close with their families. It sounds like, the American dream, right?
Yeah, totally. But then, all of a sudden, Eric is found dead in his bed. At first, everyone thought it was like a medical emergency, maybe an aneurysm or something. But then the autopsy showed he had a lethal dose of fentanyl in his system. And that's when things really started to get complicated.
Because now you've got two families who are both grieving this huge loss, but they're telling completely different stories about what happened. Corey's family is saying that Eric might have been using like THC gummies and pain pills sometimes, and maybe he got them from, not the most trustworthy sources. They're kind of suggesting it could have been an accidental overdose.
Yeah, but Eric's family, they're totally denying that he ever used drugs, at all. And they were suspicious of Corey right from the start. It's not just like a difference of opinion either, It's like this fundamental difference in how they see the whole case, and it affects how they interpret every single piece of evidence.
It's like they're looking at two completely different puzzles. And of course, when something like this happens, everyone wants to know, well, what was the motive, right?
Yeah.
And then investigators find these life insurance policies on Eric, totaling almost $3 million. On top of that, there are these allegations that Corey forged Eric's signature for another policy that she was stealing from his accounts, and her house flipping business was almost $2 million in debt.
It makes you wonder if, maybe Corey's financial problems were so bad that she felt like she had to do something drastic. Could she have been desperate enough to kill her husband for the insurance money?
I mean, that's what the prosecution is trying to argue, for sure. But Corey's lawyer is fighting back hard. They're saying she's innocent, that she didn't do anything wrong. They're saying the debt was just a normal part of her business. Flipping houses is risky, and that Eric knew all about it and agreed to it.
So we have to really dig into their finances here. Was Eric actually okay with the level of risk that Corey was taking? Or was there some tension brewing beneath the surface? The defense is going to have to prove that Eric was on board with all of this, and the prosecution is going to be looking for anything that doesn't add up in their financial records.
And just when you think you're starting to understand the money situation, Eric's family throws another wrench into things. They're accusing Corey of trying to poison Eric before, not just once, but multiple times.
Yeah, these alleged poisoning attempts are really creepy. One time, they were on a trip to Greece in 2019, and Eric got really sick after having a drink that Corey gave him.
But of course, Corey's family has an explanation for that too. They're saying that maybe Eric accidentally drank alcohol while he was on medication, and that could have caused a bad reaction.
I mean, it could have, but the thing is, it wasn't just that one time, right? There was another incident on Valentine's Day in 2022 where Eric got sick after eating a sandwich that Corey made. And again, Corey's family says it was just food poisoning or something.
But when you look at those two things together, it starts to feel like maybe it wasn't just a coincidence. It makes you wonder if she really was trying to hurt him.
Without hard evidence, it's hard to say for sure. But it definitely adds to the suspicion around Corey, and it gives more weight to Eric's family's accusations.
And then there's the whole thing with the mansion that Corey was flipping right before Eric died.
Yeah.
This wasn't just any project. It was like a super luxurious property, and they were celebrating it the night he died.
But Eric's family is saying he was completely against buying it. They say he thought it was a huge financial risk, which totally contradicts what Corey's family is saying.
So who do you believe? It just adds another layer of confusion to their relationship, and it makes you think, were they really on the same page, or were there, underlying problems about money and ambition?
And on top of all that, it turns out that Eric had set up a secret trust without Corey knowing about it. It makes you think, did he not trust her? Were there bigger problems in their marriage than anyone realized?
It definitely paints a different picture than the happy family they seem to be. And it seems like their marriage wasn't as perfect as it looked from the outside. There were arguments about Corey's ambitions because Eric wanted her to stay home with the kids, and he would go on these long hunting trips that caused some friction. There were even rumors about Eric cheating, although his family denies that.
Well, every marriage has its ups and downs, right? Sometimes what looks perfect from the outside is actually full of conflict behind closed doors. Whether those problems were serious enough to play a role in Eric's death, that's another question.
It's definitely a puzzle. Corey's family is still insisting that even with those issues, the couple was working things out and they were happy in the months before Eric died. So were they actually getting back on track, or was that all just a show?
To figure that out, we have to look at the evidence, and this is where things get really interesting. Because the prosecution's whole case depends on the testimony of one key witness, a woman named Carmen Lauber. So, this Carmen Lauber, we'll call her CL, she claims that she sold Corey fentanyl not once, but twice. The first time, CL says that Corey told her it was for an investor who had a bad back, like an injury.
Okay.
But it's the second time that's really suspicious. CL says this happened just a week before Eric died, and that Corey paid for the fentanyl with a check from her business.
Wow, so that connects Corey directly to the drug that killed Eric, right?
Right, it does. But we have to remember where this information is coming from. CL has a criminal record. She's been in trouble with drugs before, so the defense is obviously going to question whether she's telling the truth.
So can we really believe her? What if she's just saying what the police want her to say? Like maybe they pressured her into cooperating, promising her a lighter sentence if she helps them build a case against Corey.
Exactly. That's exactly what Corey's lawyers are arguing. They're pointing out that CL is a convicted felon, and they're saying that there's no other evidence to back up her story. No texts, no other witnesses, nothing.
It's like she said, right. But then there's this whole other thing that makes things even weirder. They found a handwritten letter in Corey's jail cell, and it's called Walk the Dog.
Oh, yeah, that letter. When they found that, it really shook things up. The prosecution thinks it's like a secret message from Corey to her brother, Ronnie. They're saying she's basically telling him what to say in court so he can help her, create this whole story that supports her defense.
And what exactly does she want him to say?
Well, the letter talks about connecting Eric to Mexico and drugs. So the prosecution thinks she's trying to get Ronnie to lie on the stand and say that Eric was using drugs, which would match what her family's been saying. That's a really serious accusation, It's called witness tampering, and it's a crime. If they can prove that Corey was trying to get her brother to lie, it's going to hurt her case a lot.
But Corey says the letter isn't what it looks like at all. She says it's just a story she was writing, like for a book or something, and it was never meant for anyone else to see.
So it's like, how do you interpret something like that? Can you separate the writer from their work? I mean, is it possible that she was just writing a story, or was she really trying to send a message?
The judge actually sided with Corey on this one. The prosecution wanted a no-contact order, which would have meant Corey couldn't talk to her brother at all, but the judge said no.
That's a big deal, because if they couldn't talk, it would have been really hard for Corey and her brother to coordinate their stories, for the trial. The judge's decision means that the prosecution didn't have enough proof to show that Corey was trying to tamper with witnesses.
But even if the judge didn't buy it, the whole thing with the letter just makes the whole case even more suspicious.
And then there's the children's book that Corey wrote.
Yeah, the book. About a year after Eric died, Corey wrote and published this children's book about dealing with loss. She even went on local TV to talk about it, presenting herself as this grieving widow who wanted to help other people.
The book is actually pretty sad. It's about a little boy who loses his dad. But the boy finds comfort knowing that his dad's spirit is still around, like a guardian angel watching over him.
It's a nice story, and a lot of people really connected with it. But the timing of it all is just kind of strange, right? Was she really just trying to help people, or was it more about making herself look good, getting sympathy from the public? Yeah, Eric's family definitely thinks it was the second one. They think Corey was just trying to manipulate people and make herself look like the victim, and they're angry that she might be profiting off of Eric's death.
It's a tough situation. On the one hand, writing can be really therapeutic, and sharing your story can help other people heal too. But on the other hand, it can feel like she's exploiting this tragedy to make money and protect herself.
And it didn't exactly help her image. A few weeks after she was on TV talking about the book, she was arrested for Eric's murder.
Yeah, that was a big shock for everyone. One minute she's this grieving widow writing children's books, and the next minute she's the prime suspect in her husband's death.
And what exactly are the police saying she did?
They're saying she poisoned Eric with fentanyl. Maybe she put it in his drink that night. They're pointing to these Google searches that Corey made on her phone after Eric died. She searched things like, "What's a lethal dose of fentanyl?" and "Can you recover deleted texts from an iPhone?"
That does sound pretty incriminating. Like maybe she was trying to figure out how to get rid of evidence?
That's what the prosecution is going with, yeah. But Corey's lawyer is saying she was just scared and confused. They're saying she was just trying to understand what happened to Eric and was worried that she might be blamed.
I mean, that makes sense too, right? Wouldn't anyone be freaking out and trying to figure things out if their husband died suddenly like that?
Yeah, it's a valid point. But the prosecution is going to say that those searches, along with everything else, show that she planned this whole thing. They're going to say that she knew exactly how dangerous fentanyl was and that she was trying to hide her involvement.
So which is it? Is she a grieving widow trying to find answers? Or is she a cold-hearted killer trying to cover her tracks? As we keep going through this case, we have to ask ourselves, which version of events makes more sense? Which story fits the evidence better? I feel like we keep going back and forth, with everyone saying different things and all the evidence being so open to interpretation. But what if Corey really is innocent, like her family says? Then how did Eric die? If she didn't do it, who did?
That's the big question that just hangs over this whole case. If we say the prosecution is wrong about the poisoning, then there are a few other possibilities, right? Remember, Corey's family said Eric used THC gummies and pain pills sometimes, and that he didn't always get them from, like, the safest places.
So maybe something was laced with fentanyl, and he didn't even know it. Just a horrible accident.
Exactly. It would make sense with those early theories that it was a medical emergency, like an aneurysm, because sometimes those symptoms can look a lot like an overdose. And it explains the fentanyl without, automatically pointing the finger at Corey.
Yeah, that makes sense. But then Eric's family is so sure that he didn't use drugs at all. How do we square those two stories?
Well, I think we have to remember that everyone is grieving here, and both families are going to be biased, probably without even realizing it. Maybe Eric was just more private about using certain things, or maybe his family just, like, genuinely didn't know the full story. We can't really know for sure without more evidence.
Okay, that's true. But even if it was an accident, doesn't that still mean Corey could be responsible in some way? Like, what if she was negligent?
Oh, for sure. If Corey knew that Eric was using stuff from shady sources and she didn't try to stop him or make sure he was being safe, that could definitely be a problem legally, even if she didn't personally give him the fentanyl.
So it's like this moral gray area,
Mm.
Where does an accident end and negligence begin?
Exactly. And then we have to think about all the stuff with their marriage and those other times Eric got sick. If there was already a pattern of risky behavior or if they were fighting a lot, that's going to affect how the jury sees the evidence, even if Eric's death was an accident in the end.
And then there's all the stuff with Corey's finances, too. Even if she didn't kill him on purpose, did she have a reason to, because of those debts and the life insurance?
Yeah, the prosecution is definitely going to try to say that she killed him for the money. They'll bring up her business, those weird transactions, all of that, to try and convince the jury that she had something to gain from his death.
So Corey's lawyers have their work cut out for them.
Yeah, they're going to have to show that her business was legitimate, that Eric knew what was going on, and that she was just trying to build a good future for their family, not trying to get rich quick by killing her husband.
So basically, it sounds like the trial is going to come down to which story the jury believes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're going to have to listen to both sides, decide who's telling the truth, and then see if that lines up with the evidence they've been given. Are they going to believe that Corey is a manipulative killer, or is she just a woman who's been caught up in a really awful situation?
It's a lot of pressure for those jurors.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter what happens, this isn't a case with a happy ending. Someone's lost a child, a brother, a husband, and those 3 boys have lost their dad.
It's just really tragic all around, and there are still so many questions that may never be answered. We'll have to see what happens at the trial in 2025. Hopefully, it will bring some closure for everyone involved. Until then, all we can really do is try to keep an open mind, think about all the different angles, and decide for ourselves what we think happened that night. The truth is probably much more complicated than we realize.